In this unit, we will be talking about transition programs and why they are important and what components need to be included in a transition plan for a student who is either 16 years or above. A few things about transition program planning. A transition planning must be results oriented. The focus should be on education and training needed to help students reach their long term goals. It should facilitate the movement from school to post school activities, and based on the student needs, it should take into account their preferences, strengths, and interests. Why is transition program or planning important? It is important because it allows us to prepare students for the big change that they will be facing when they move out of school. It is to ensure that appropriate steps are being taken to meet their goals. It also is to help students become more self-determined. It is to help others understand their disability and what their strengths are and what they need in order to be successful post school. It is the aim is to make better, more appropriate choices for themselves and to take ownership of their lives. Now that we've talked about why transition planning is important, let us talk a little about when we should start discussing transitions. A transition plan is a part of the IEP and must be developed by the age of 16 or in the 8th grade, whichever comes first. However, parents may request to develop a transition plan at any age. Now that we've talked about why transition planning is important, let us talk about who should be included in the transition planning team. The transition planning team should comprise of the student, the parents, teachers, both general ed and special ed, local school administrators, county level support coordinators, instructional coaches, related service personnel, and in addition, it should include personnel from agencies that may be providing services during and or after high school. Let's talk about what IDEA has to say about the transition planning team. According to IDEA, the student must attend the meeting or the teacher must take steps to ensure that students' preferences and interests are considered when developing the plan. Parents should receive notice that the student is invited and that this is a transition planning meeting. And they should also be informed of any other agencies that are invited. The student should be listed as a participant on the notice of meeting. As professionals, we must remember that transition plans must be unique. We have to remember that every student is important and that post secondary goals for that particular student are important too. Transition goals and activity services are equally important and they are the ones that should be driving the IEP for students, especially if they are 16 years of age. Many times they are still nothing more than an afterthought, but the goal of the transition plan is to ensure that the student can be prepared or is prepared to make the transition from moving to after school life. As you can see, the transition plan is a very important document. The transition plan must include the following: where the student is presently, it should have a preferences section, where is the student going, which would include the post secondary goals, how do we get the student there, and this would be the annual goals, annual transition goals, and should include the activities and services that the student will be participating in. Writing goals like the IEP goal for a transition plan are very critical. We have to remember that all annual goals need to be SMART. That is, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time related. Let's look at the following goal for an example. In 1 year, that indicates that it is time related, Carmen will complete a log containing 3 paragraph entries reflecting information learned. This indicates that the goal is specific. From viewing 20 documentaries or informational shows about animals on television and on the internet, this would make the goal relevant. Related to animals and animal care professions, this makes the goal achievable. Progress will be evaluated monthly. This is time related. One entry per documentary, two full entries per month by the teacher's review of the log. And this makes the goal measurable. So as we see in the following example that we just went through, it has all the components of a SMART goal. It is specific, it is measurable, it is achievable, it is relevant, and it is time related. Since transition plans and goals are very critical, it is important that the transition plans are meaningful. We as professionals must ensure that we complete the assessments well in advance. We have the student with us when we are working on the draft of the transition plan. Thus, according to the IDEA, the role of student in developing the transition plan becomes very, very critical. As a professional, it is our responsibility to prep the student on what he or she will do and say during the transition plan meeting. And it is also our responsibility that we review the transition plan every time we review the rest of the IEP. Only if these things are done would the transition plan be meaningful and successful. Now I just want you to take a few minutes to think about why is the students' involvement so important in planning their transition plan. Transition plans are critical because they allow the students to be self-determined. You as a professional should make sure that you talk to your caseload of students about their disability, the accommodations that they need. You should make sure that you talk about what they want and what they need. To what degree would they be involved in their IEP meetings? You should let the parents know what conversation you have had or intend to have with their child, and you should encourage parents to allow their children to make as many choices as they can to be as independent as possible. In the next few slides, we will be talking about some current issues, challenges, and recommendations when it comes to transition planning. As professionals, we must ensure that we promote students' self-determination and self-advocacy. We could do this by numerous ways. One, by providing opportunities for decision making. We should begin self-determination instruction early on, in fact, as early as elementary grades. We should support students' development and use of advocacy skills. We should make work-based learning. We should give them opportunities to incorporate self-determination and career development skills. We should also intensify teaching of specific self-determination skills, especially during high school, and we should promote student-centered and student-run IEPs because this would give them a sense of ownership, thereby helping them become self-determined and advocating for themselves. We as professionals must ensure that students have access to the general education curriculum, and this we could do by using universal design to make classrooms, curriculum, and assessments usable by the largest number of students as possible. We should provide appropriate instructional accommodations and instructional modifications when necessary. We should clearly specify the subject matter domain and the scope of the curriculum. We should help set priorities for outcomes and allocate instructional time based on these priorities. We should also use instructional approaches that have shown to promote positive outcomes for students who have been identified with a disability those who are at risk of being identified with a disability. Our goal should be to increase the school completion rates of students with disabilities. And this we could do by developing methods and procedures that are based on best practices in dropout prevention and intervention. We should determine the incentives and methods needed to fully implement evidence based practices. We should conduct research to demonstrate and validate new dropout prevention intervention strategies. We should investigate and share information about the impact of new accountability forces, and we should build on newly funded longitudinal studies, especially those conducted by the National Longitudinal Transition Study 2 and the Special Education Elementary Longitudinal Study, because this will help us examine how students' engagement with schools is critical. In order for transition plans to be successful, we should make high school graduation decisions based on meaningful indicators of students' learning and skills and clarify the implications of different diploma options for students with disabilities. And these we can do by promoting the use of alternate assessments, by clarifying the implications of state graduation requirements, and by clarifying the implications of different diploma options for continued special education services. We must also ensure that students have access to and full participation in post secondary education and employment, and this we could do by identifying and engaging the responsible agencies, resources, and accommodations as early as high school. We should promote the value of preparation and for participation in post secondary education. We should identify accommodations and supports that are required for students to participate in post school environments. We should ensure that community service agencies participate systematically in the development of post school transition plans. We should also engage in integrated service planning and provide information to parents on essential health and income maintenance programs. We should definitely try to promote collaborative employer engagement and establish partnerships with the workforce. In order to create successful transition plans, we must ensure that we increase informed parent participation and involvement in education planning, life planning, and decision making. This we can do by providing comprehensive parent family training. We could reduce the confusion and frustration by coordinating services and streamlining access to information and programs. We could provide opportunities for parents to enhance their knowledge. We should expand parent and family involvement and participation. And we should work with community organizations serving culturally and racially diverse populations to assure that the programs and services meet the needs of all parents and families.